The escape pod shuddered violently as it pierced the atmosphere of Clasius 9. Zix, its lone occupant, gripped the controls with all four of his tentacle-like appendages. Warning lights flashed across the battered console, bathing his iridescent skin in an angry red glow. "Come on," Zix muttered, his vocal sacs vibrating with tension. "Just a little further." The pod's hull groaned under the strain of entry. Through the viewing port, Zix could see nothing but swirling white. The eternal blizzard that engulfed this desolate ice world. It wasn't an ideal hiding place, but it was remote enough that his pursuers might not think to look here. With a bone-jarring impact, the pod slammed into the frozen surface. Zix was thrown forward, his gelatinous body absorbing much of the shock. As the pod skidded to a halt, he took stock of his situation. The life support systems were failing, and the pod's small engine had been damaged beyond repair in the landing. Zix knew he couldn't stay here long. The pod's meager heat reserves would soon be overcome by the planet's sub-zero temperatures. He needed to find shelter, and fast. Donning a protective suit designed to insulate his heat-loving body, Zix triggered the manual release on the hatch. It opened with a hiss, letting in a blast of frigid air and swirling snow. Squinting against the glare of white, Zix peered out at the barren landscape. In the distance, barely visible through the storm, he spotted an unnatural formation, a structure of some kind. Zix's heart sank. He had hoped this world would be uninhabited, but it seemed his luck had run out once again. With no other choice, Zix gathered what supplies he could carry and set out across the icy terrain. Each step was a struggle against the howling wind and treacherous footing. More than once, he nearly lost his balance on hidden patches of ice. As he drew closer to the structure, Zix began to make out more details. It appeared to be a small outpost or research station, built low to the ground and partially embedded in the ice to withstand the planet's harsh conditions. Lights glowed faintly from within, a beacon of warmth in this frozen wasteland. Zix hesitated. He had no idea what kind of beings might inhabit this place, or how they would react to his presence. In his experience, most species were wary of outsiders, especially those as alien as himself. But the bitter cold was already seeping through his protective gear. He needed shelter, even if it meant revealing himself. Cautiously, Zix approached what appeared to be an airlock entrance. He was about to reach for the external comm panel when the door suddenly slid open. A figure stood silhouetted in the doorway, bulky in a thermal suit. "By the stars," a gruff voice exclaimed. "What in blazes are you?" Zix froze, his chromatophores flickering rapidly with anxiety. The being before him was unmistakably human, a species he had encountered only in passing during his travels. They were not known for their hospitality toward alien life. "Please," Zix said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I mean no harm. My ship crashed, and I seek only temporary shelter from the cold." The human regarded him silently for a long moment. Zix tensed, ready to flee if necessary. But then the figure stepped aside, gesturing for him to enter. "Well, don't just stand there letting all the heat out," the human grumbled. "Come on in before you freeze solid." Gratefully, Zix ducked inside. The airlock cycled shut behind him, and he felt the blessed warmth begin to seep into his chilled body. As they waited for the pressurization cycle to complete, the human removed their helmet, revealing the weathered face of an older male. "Name's Garrett," he said gruffly. "I'm the chief engineer at this little slice of paradise we call Outpost Sigma 12. And you are?" "I am called Zix," he replied, carefully modulating his vocal sacs to approximate human speech patterns. "I thank you for your kindness." Garrett snorted. "Don't thank me yet. The others might not be so welcoming once they get a load of you. We don't get many visitors out here, and certainly none quite so exotic." The inner airlock door opened, admitting them to a small antechamber. Zix marveled at the efficiency of the human design. Every inch of space seemed to serve multiple purposes. Storage lockers lined the walls, and a decontamination unit hummed quietly in one corner. "Better get you cleaned up before I introduce you to the boss," Garrett said, gesturing to the decontamination unit. Standard procedure for all new arrivals. Helps keep any nasty bugs from spreading through the station. Zix complied, stepping into the unit. A beam of pale light swept over him, tingling against his skin. He hoped the scan wouldn't reveal anything too alarming about his alien physiology. As the decontamination cycle finished, Garrett was watching him with poorly concealed curiosity. "So what brings someone like you to this frozen rock? You said your ship crashed. You some kind of explorer?" Zix hesitated. He couldn't reveal the true reason for his presence here, that he was a fugitive, fleeing those who would exploit his unique abilities. But perhaps a partial truth would suffice. "I am a traveler," he said carefully. "My home world is far from here. I was passing through this system when my ship malfunctioned. The crash landing was not intentional." Garrett raised an eyebrow. "Must have been some malfunction to bring you down on Glacius 9. This planet's not exactly on any major trade routes." Before Zix could formulate a response, a voice crackled over the intercom. "Garrett? The long-range sensors just picked up an unidentified craft entering the system. You'd better get up here." Zix felt his heart race. Could his pursuers have found him already? He forced himself to remain calm as Garrett answered the call. "On my way, Chief. And, we've got a bit of a situation down here. You might want to prepare the others for a surprise." As Garrett ended the transmission, he fixed Zix with a piercing stare. "All right, friend. I think it's time you told me what's really going on. Because I've got a feeling that ship isn't here by coincidence." Zix's mind raced. He had only just arrived, and already his sanctuary was threatening to crumble. As Garrett waited expectantly for an answer, Zix knew that his next words could determine not only his fate, but potentially that of everyone in this small outpost. The icy winds of Glacius 9 howled outside, but within the station, the air grew thick with tension as two beings from vastly different worlds stood at the precipice of a decision that would change both their lives forever. First contact. Zix's tentacles twitched nervously as he followed Garrett through the winding corridors of Outpost Sigma 12. The human's earlier warmth had cooled considerably since the announcement of an approaching ship. Zix couldn't blame him. His own anxiety was mounting with each step. "Chief's gonna want to talk to you," Garrett grumbled, pausing before a heavy metal door. "Try not to freak her out too much, all right?" Before Zix could respond, the door slid open with a pneumatic hiss. A tall, stern-faced woman stood in the threshold, her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her eyes widened momentarily at the sight of Zix before narrowing in suspicion. "I'm Dr. Helena Reeves, head of this research station," she said, her voice clipped. "Garrett tells me you crash-landed here. Is that correct?" Zix dipped his head in what he hoped was a respectful gesture. "Yes, Dr. Reeves. I am called Zix. I apologize for the intrusion, but my ship was damaged beyond repair in the landing." Dr. Reeves studied him silently for a long moment. "And the ship our sensors just detected. I don't suppose that's a coincidence." Zix felt his chromatophores ripple with anxiety, a tell he couldn't fully suppress. I cannot say for certain, but it is possible they are searching for me." "Searching?" Dr. Reeves' eyebrow arched. "Are you some kind of fugitive?" "Not in the way you might think," Zix said carefully. "I am a refugee. Those who pursue me wish to exploit my abilities for their own gain. I seek only safety and the freedom to live peacefully." Dr. Reeves exchanged a look with Garrett. "What kind of abilities are we talking about here?" Zix hesitated. Revealing too much could be dangerous, but these humans had shown him kindness. They deserved some measure of truth. "My species possesses a unique connection to quantum fields. We can manipulate probabilities in ways that defy conventional physics." Garrett let out a low whistle. "No wonder someone's after you. That kind of power could change everything. Or destroy everything," Dr. Reeves added grimly. She fixed Zix with a piercing stare. "Why should we trust you? How do we know you won't bring destruction to our outpost?" Zix felt a wave of despair wash over him. He had hoped to find sanctuary here, however brief, but it seemed his very presence put these humans at risk. "I understand your concern," he said softly. "If you wish me to leave, I will do so. I would not endanger those who showed me kindness." Dr. Reeves' expression softened slightly. "That won't be necessary. At least not yet. But I need to know exactly what we're dealing with here. That ship will reach us within the hour, and I need to decide how to respond." Zix nodded, his gratitude evident in the gentle pulsing of his bioluminescent patches. "I will tell you everything I can." Over the next several minutes, Zix explained his situation in greater detail. He described the shadowy organization that sought to weaponize his people's abilities, and how he had barely escaped their clutches. As he spoke, he could see the humans' expressions shifting from suspicion to sympathy. "Well, shit," Garrett muttered when Zix had finished. "Sounds like you're in a real mess, buddy." Dr. Reeves nodded thoughtfully. "Indeed. But we can't simply hand you over to these people, not if what you've told us is true." She turned to Garrett. "Prep the long-range comms. We need to alert Central Command about this situation." "Wait," Zix interjected, his voice tinged with panic. "Please, you must not broadcast my presence here. They have ways of intercepting communications. It could lead them straight to us." Dr. Reeves frowned. "Then what do you suggest? We're not equipped to fend off an attack if they decide to come in guns blazing." Zix's mind raced. He had hoped to avoid using his abilities, but the situation was growing dire. "There may be a way I can help, but I will need your trust." Garrett and Dr. Reeves exchanged wary glances. "What did you have in mind?" the chief asked. "I can influence probabilities," Zix explained hesitantly. "Make it more likely that they will not detect my presence here, but it requires focus, and I will need a quiet place to concentrate." Dr. Reeves considered this for a long moment before nodding. "All right. Garrett, take our guest to the meditation room. It's the most isolated spot in the outpost." She fixed Zix with a stern look. "But understand this, if you try anything that puts my people at risk, I won't hesitate to space you myself. Clear?" Zix dipped his head. "Perfectly clear. You have my word. I mean you no harm." As Garrett led him through the station, Zix could feel the curious stares of the other crew members they passed. News of his arrival had clearly spread quickly. He kept his gaze lowered, not wanting to alarm anyone unnecessarily. The meditation room turned out to be a small, dimly lit chamber with soft cushions scattered about the floor. Garrett gestured for Zix to enter. "Make yourself comfortable, I guess. I'll be right outside if you need anything." Left alone, Zix settled himself on one of the cushions and tried to calm his racing thoughts. He had never attempted to use his abilities at such a distance before. The strain could be immense, possibly even dangerous. But he saw no other choice. Closing his inner eyelids, Zix reached out with his consciousness, feeling for the quantum threads that connected all things. Slowly, carefully, he began to pluck at them, weaving new patterns of probability. "Let them pass us by," he thought fervently. "Let them find no trace of my presence. Let this outpost and its inhabitants remain safe and hidden." Time seemed to stretch and distort as Zix sank deeper into his trance. He could feel the approaching ship like a looming storm on the horizon of his awareness. Gently, ever so gently, he nudged it off course, amplifying the statistical noise that might mask any signs of his crashed pod or the outpost itself. Sweat beaded on Zix's skin as he strained to maintain the delicate manipulations. His entire body trembled with the effort. Just when he felt he could hold on no longer, he sensed a shift. The prodding tendrils of the search ship's sensors swept past them, finding nothing of note. With a gasp, Zix released his hold on the quantum fields. He slumped forward, utterly drained. It had worked, but at what cost? His head swam, and his vision blurred alarmingly. The door slid open, and Garrett rushed in. "Hey, you all right? You look like hell." Zix tried to respond, but found he couldn't form the words. The room tilted sickeningly around him. The last thing he heard before darkness claimed him was Garrett's panicked voice. Medical team to the meditation room. Now. As consciousness slipped away, Zix could only hope that his gamble had paid off. For his sake, and for the humans who had shown him unexpected kindness in his hour of need. The storm. Zix awoke to the steady beep of unfamiliar medical equipment. His inner eyelids fluttered open, revealing the sterile white of what he assumed was the outpost's medical bay. Dr. Reeves stood at his bedside, studying a holographic readout with a furrowed brow. "Welcome back," she said, noticing his movement. "You gave us quite a scare." Zix tried to speak, but his vocal sacs felt dry and uncooperative. Dr. Reeves offered him a glass of water, which he gratefully accepted. "The ship," he managed to croak after a few sips. "Gone," Dr. Reeves confirmed. "Whatever you did, it worked. They passed us by without so much as a second glance." She paused, her expression growing serious. "But you nearly killed yourself in the process. Your neural activity was off the charts. I've never seen anything like it." Zix nodded weakly. "The strain was greater than anticipated. I apologize for causing you concern." Dr. Reeves waved off his apology. "You potentially saved all our lives. I'd say that more than makes up for a little medical drama." Her tone softened slightly. "How are you feeling now?" "Drained," Zix admitted, "but I will recover. My species is resilient." Before Dr. Reeves could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the outpost. Garrett's voice crackled over the intercom. "Chief, we've got a situation. You'd better get up here." Dr. Reeves cursed under her breath. "Stay here and rest," she instructed Zix. "I'll be back once I've sorted this out." But as she turned to leave, the entire structure shuddered violently. Zix was nearly thrown from his bed, saved only by Dr. Reeves' quick reflexes. "What in blazes was that?" she muttered, helping Zix steady himself. The intercom crackled to life once more, Garrett's voice now tinged with panic. "Chief, it's a storm. Biggest one I've ever seen. The outer sensors are already going haywire." Dr. Reeves' face paled. "Impossible. We're not due for anything like that for months." Zix felt a chill that had nothing to do with the outpost's temperature. Could his probability manipulation have had unintended consequences? I may be responsible," he said quietly. "My efforts to conceal us might have affected local weather patterns." Dr. Reeves shot him a sharp look. "We'll deal with that later. Right now, we need to secure the outpost." She helped Zix to his feet. "Think you can walk? I could use all hands on deck for this." Despite his lingering weakness, Zix nodded. "I will do whatever I can to help." Together, they made their way to the control room. The scene that greeted them was one of barely controlled chaos. Crew members rushed back and forth between stations, calling out readings and status updates. Through the reinforced windows, Zix could see a wall of swirling white bearing down on them. Garrett looked up from his console, relief evident on his face. "Chief, thank God. This storm's like nothing I've ever seen. Wind speeds are off the charts, and the temperature's dropping fast." Dr. Reeves immediately took charge. "Divert all non-essential power to the shields and life support. Initiate lockdown procedures on all outer hatches and airlocks." As the crew scrambled to comply, Zix felt a wave of guilt wash over him. "Please," he said, addressing Dr. Reeves. "Let me help. This is my fault. I should do something to make it right." Dr. Reeves studied him for a moment before nodding. "All right. What did you have in mind?" Zix considered their options. "I may be able to nudge the probabilities again. Not to stop the storm entirely, but perhaps to lessen its impact on the outpost." "After what happened last time," Garrett interjected. "No way. It could kill you." "He's right," Dr. Reeves agreed. "It's too risky." But Zix stood firm. "The risk to all of you is far greater. Please, allow me to try. I will be more careful this time." After a tense moment, Dr. Reeves nodded reluctantly. "Fine. But at the first sign of trouble, you stop. Understood?" Zix agreed, settling himself in a corner of the control room. As he prepared to reach out with his abilities once more, he felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Garrett, offering a small smile of encouragement. "Good luck, buddy," the engineer said. "We're all counting on you." Closing his eyes, Zix extended his awareness outward. The storm loomed large in his perception, a chaotic maelstrom of conflicting probabilities. Carefully, he began to tease apart the threads, seeking out the small changes that might cascade into larger effects. A bead of sweat formed on his brow as he worked. This was delicate, dangerous work. One wrong move could amplify the storm rather than diminish it. But slowly, ever so slowly, he began to make progress. The howling of the wind outside seemed to lessen slightly. The shuddering of the outpost structure became less pronounced. Zix pressed on, encouraged by the small victories. But as the minutes stretched into hours, the strain began to take its toll. Zix's limbs trembled with exhaustion, and dark spots danced at the edges of his vision. Still, he refused to give up. Just when it seemed he could endure no more, Zix felt a shift in the storm's energy. The raging tempest began to dissipate, breaking apart into more manageable squalls. With a gasp, Zix released his hold on the quantum fields. He slumped forward, utterly spent, but this time strong hands caught him before he could fall. "Easy there," Garrett's voice came from above him. "I've got you." As Zix's vision cleared, he saw the relieved faces of the outpost crew gathered around him. Dr. Reeves stepped forward, a look of amazement on her face. "I don't know how you did it," she said, "but you saved us all. The storm's breaking up. We're going to make it through." A cheer went up from the assembled crew. Zix felt a warmth spread through him that had nothing to do with his physical state. For the first time since he'd fled his home, he felt accepted. But even as the celebration began, a nagging doubt gnawed at the back of Zix's mind. He had expended a tremendous amount of energy to divert the storm. If his pursuers returned now, he would be in no condition to conceal himself or the outpost. As if reading his thoughts, Dr. Reeves placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Don't worry," she said softly. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." Zix nodded gratefully, allowing himself a moment of hope. But deep down, he knew their trials were far from over. The storm might have passed, but greater challenges lay ahead. Challenges that would test not only his abilities, but the newfound trust between him and the humans of Outpost Sigma-12. The hunt. The aftermath of the storm brought a fragile peace to Outpost Sigma-12. As the crew worked to repair the damage, Zix found himself cautiously accepted into their tight-knit community. His alien presence, once a source of fear and suspicion, had become a symbol of unexpected salvation. Zix spent his days assisting where he could, his unique abilities proving useful in ways both large and small. He helped Garrett recalibrate the outpost's sensors, using his quantum sensitivity to fine-tune delicate instruments. In the hydroponics bay, he worked alongside the botanists, subtly influencing plant growth to increase their yield. But even as he grew closer to the humans, Zix couldn't shake the feeling that his time on Glacius 9 was running short. The nagging fear of discovery haunted his every moment. It was during a quiet evening meal in the mess hall that Zix's worst fears were realized. The alarm klaxons blared to life, causing everyone to jump in surprise. Dr. Reeves' voice came over the intercom, tense and urgent. "All personnel to emergency stations. We have multiple unidentified vessels entering orbit. This is not a drill." The mess hall erupted into controlled chaos as crew members rushed to their assigned posts. Zix felt a cold dread settle in the pit of his stomach. He knew, with grim certainty, that his pursuers had returned. Garrett appeared at his side, face grim. "Come on," he said, tugging at Zix's arm. We need to get you somewhere safe." As they hurried through the corridors, Zix's mind raced. "I can't hide," he said. "They'll tear this place apart looking for me. I have to leave." Garrett shook his head vehemently. "No way. You're one of us now. We protect our own." They arrived at the control room to find Dr. Reeves coordinating the outpost's defenses. She looked up as they entered, her expression a mixture of concern and determination. "They're hailing us," she informed them, "demanding we turn over any non-terrestrial entities in our custody." Zix felt his chromatophores ripple with distress. "You must comply," he said. "I won't let you endanger yourselves for my sake." But Dr. Reeves held up a hand, silencing him. "We've already discussed this as a crew. You risk your life to save us. We won't abandon you now." Before Zix could protest further, the main view screen flickered to life. The face that appeared was eerily similar to Zix's own species, but twisted by cruelty and greed. "I am Commander Vex of the Quantum Acquisition Force," the being announced. "We know you are harboring a fugitive of immense value. Surrender him immediately, or we will be forced to take more aggressive measures." Dr. Reeves stepped forward, her voice steady. "This is a sovereign Earth outpost. We have no knowledge of any fugitives. I suggest you leave our airspace immediately." Commander Vex's eyes narrowed. "You lie poorly, human. We track the probability distortions to this very location. Our agent is there, and we will reclaim him, with or without your cooperation." The transmission cut off abruptly. Dr. Reeves turned to Zix, her expression grim. "I don't suppose you have any other tricks up your sleeve." Zix's mind raced. He had expended so much energy during the storm. He wasn't sure he had the strength for another large-scale probability manipulation. But perhaps. "I may have an idea," he said slowly. "But it's risky, and I'll need your help." As Zix outlined his plan, he saw a mixture of hope and apprehension dawn on the faces around him. It was audacious, perhaps even foolhardy, but it was their only chance. "All right," Dr. Reeves said finally. "Let's do it. Garrett, prep the emergency shuttle. The rest of you, to your stations. And Zix." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Good luck." The next few minutes were a blur of activity. Zix found himself in the shuttle bay, his heart racing as Garrett made final preparations for launch. "You sure about this?" Garrett asked, his usual bravado tempered by genuine concern. Zix nodded, trying to project more confidence than he felt. "It's the only way to keep everyone safe. Just thank you for everything." Garrett clapped him on the shoulder. "Hey, what are friends for? Now get going, you overgrown squid. And try not to get yourself killed, all right?" As the shuttle's engines roared to life, Zix took one last look at the outpost that had become his unexpected sanctuary. Then, with a deep breath, he launched into the frozen void of Clasius 9's atmosphere. Almost immediately, he felt the pursuing ships lock onto his signal. Good, that was part of the plan. As he pushed the shuttle to its limits, skimming low over the planet's icy surface, Zix reached out with his abilities one more time. He couldn't hide himself completely, not from sensors calibrated to detect his unique quantum signature. But he could muddy the waters, creating false positives and phantom readings that would confuse and misdirect his pursuers. The shuttle bucked and groaned as Zix pushed it beyond its design specifications. Behind him, he could see the sleek, predatory shapes of the Quantum Acquisition Force vessels, gaining ground with every passing second. Just when it seemed they would overtake him, Zix banked hard, diving into a narrow ice canyon. The maneuver was reckless, bordering on suicidal, but if his calculations were correct, a massive wall of ice loomed ahead, seemingly impassable. Zix gritted his teeth and pushed forward, every fiber of his being focused on manipulating the probabilities around him. At the last possible instant, a narrow crevice appeared in the ice wall, just wide enough for the shuttle to squeeze through. Zix shot through the gap, hearing the satisfying crunch of his pursuers' ships slamming into the unyielding ice behind him. But his relief was short-lived. As he emerged on the other side of the ice wall, his shuttle's engines sputtered and died, overcome by the strain of the chase and the planet's harsh conditions. The little craft plummeted from the sky, spiraling towards the unforgiving frozen surface below. As the ground rushed up to meet him, Zix closed his eyes and focused every last ounce of his strength on one final manipulation of probability. The impact, when it came, was jarring but not fatal. The shuttle skidded across the ice, coming to rest in a deep snowbank. As silence fell over the crash site, broken only by the creaking of cooling metal, Zix allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. He had escaped his immediate pursuers, yes, but he was now stranded in the middle of a frozen wasteland, with no way to contact his friends at the outpost, and he had no doubt that Commander Vex would not give up so easily. As the bitter cold of Glacius 9 began to seep into the shuttle's battered hull, Zix knew that his greatest challenge still lay ahead. Somehow, he would have to find a way to survive long enough for help to arrive, if it ever did. With trembling limbs, Zix began to gather what supplies he could from the wreckage. The hunt might be over for now, but the true test of survival was just beginning. The choice. The icy winds of Glacius 9 howled around the crashed shuttle, driving snow and ice into every crevice. Inside the battered hull, Zix huddled near the failing emergency heater, his iridescent skin dulled by cold and exhaustion. He had managed to salvage some supplies from the wreckage, but they wouldn't last long in these harsh conditions. As another day dawned, indistinguishable from the endless night that had preceded it, Zix found his thoughts drifting back to the warmth and camaraderie he had briefly experienced at Outpost Sigma 12. Had his desperate gambit worked? Were Garrett, Dr. Reeves, and the others safe, or had his presence brought destruction upon those who had shown him kindness? A sudden beeping from the shuttle's half-functional communication system jolted Zix from his reverie. Hope surged through him as he scrambled to activate the receiver. Had his friends at the outpost managed to locate him? But the voice that crackled through the static wasn't Garrett's friendly drawl or Dr. Reeves' authoritative tone. It was the cold, reptilian voice of Commander Vex. "We know you're out there, refugee," the commander hissed. "Your little trick may have bought you some time, but it won't save you. Even now, we're closing in on your position." Zix felt his heart sink. He had hoped the crash and the planet's electromagnetic interference would have hidden him from their sensors, but he had underestimated the tenacity of his pursuers. "But I'm feeling generous," Vex continued, a note of cruel amusement in his voice. "Surrender yourself now, and I'll spare your human friends. Resist, and well, I can't guarantee their safety. The choice is yours." The transmission cut off, leaving Zix in stunned silence. He knew Vex's offer was likely a lie. The commander had no reason to show mercy to the outpost once he had what he wanted. But the seed of doubt had been planted. Could Zix truly risk the lives of those who had sheltered him on the slim chance of escaping once more? As if in answer to his unspoken question, another signal broke through the static. This time, it was Garrett's voice, strained but determined. "Zix, buddy, if you can hear this, hang tight. We're coming for you. Don't do anything stupid, all right?" The transmission was brief, likely to avoid detection, but it filled Zix with a warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. They hadn't abandoned him. Despite the danger, despite the odds, they were coming. But with that warmth came a crushing wave of guilt. How could he allow them to risk everything for him? Vex's ships were surely monitoring all communications. By coming to his rescue, the humans would be walking into a trap. Zix knew he had to make a choice, and quickly. He could surrender himself to Vex, hoping against hope that the commander would keep his word and spare the outpost. Or he could trust in his newfound friends and hold out for rescue, potentially dooming them all. As the weight of the decision pressed down upon him, Zix felt a strange calm settle over him. For the first time since he had fled his homeworld, he knew with absolute certainty what he had to do. Summoning the last reserves of his strength, Zix reached out with his abilities one final time. But instead of manipulating the probabilities around him, he focused inward, on the very essence of his being. The quantum energy that coursed through his body began to pulse and swirl, growing more intense with each passing second. Zix felt a searing pain as his physical form started to destabilize, breaking down at the subatomic level. Outside the shuttle, the storm suddenly intensified. Lightning crackled across the sky, and the very fabric of reality seemed to warp and bend. Vex's ships, closing in on Zix's position, found their instruments going haywire, their sensors overloaded by the maelstrom of quantum energy. At the epicenter of the storm, Zix's body began to glow with an otherworldly light. He thought of Garrett's friendship, of Dr. Reeves' leadership, of the acceptance he had found among the humans of Outpost Sigma-12. With the last of his consciousness, he sent out a pulse of pure quantum energy, a beacon that would guide his friends to safety and lead his pursuers astray. Then, in a blinding flash of light, Zix's physical form dissolved entirely. The energy that had been his body expanded outward in a massive shockwave, scrambling Vex's ships and creating a quantum anomaly that would confound sensors for years to come. When Garrett and the rescue team from Outpost Sigma-12 finally reached the crash site, they found no trace of their alien friend. The shuttle was there, half buried in snow, but of Zix there was no sign. Only a lingering warmth in the air and a faint iridescent glow on the ice hinted at what had transpired. As the humans stood in stunned silence, Garrett felt a strange sensation wash over him, a feeling of peace, of gratitude, and of hope. Somehow he knew that Zix was not truly gone, but had become something more, something beyond their understanding. In the years that followed, the quantum anomaly created by Zix's sacrifice became a subject of intense study. Outpost Sigma-12, once a remote and forgotten research station, was transformed into a hub of scientific discovery. Garrett and Dr. Reeves led the research efforts, always guided by the memory of their extraordinary friend. And on quiet nights, when the aurora danced across Glacius 9's sky in shimmering waves of color, some swore they could see patterns in the light, patterns that spoke of distant worlds, of friendship that transcended species, and of a choice made in the name of love and sacrifice. The tale of Zix, the alien refugee who had found a home among the stars, became legend. And though his physical form was gone, his legacy lived on, a testament to the power of trust, friendship, and the indomitable spirit of those who dare to reach across the vast distances of space to connect with others.